Toxic shame is an internal separation from ourself. It's where the false self is born and created, and it's also the third stage of what I call the worst day cycle, which I wrote about in my book, Your Journey to Success. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to help you transform the emotional misery of toxic shame into emotional mastery by bringing awareness as to how that false self was created in all of us. And I say that, and I mean it, all of us. And it's my life experience. Not a single person on this planet is not struggling with toxic shame, from the least successful to the most successful. And as you learn about the concepts I teach, you see it very clearly. It's like, oh my gosh, it's all of us. Therefore, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something we all need to drop the toxic shame around it and just accept. We're all perfectly imperfect. We're in this battle together. Let's get honest about what we're struggling with and bring it into consciousness so we can talk about it and we can all deal with it collectively. So first of all, let's talk about how that false self is created. And it starts with our parents, not because our parents are bad people, but they're perfectly imperfect. They're human, all right? And so unfortunately though, because parents are imperfect, they inadvertently communicate to us in a way that creates this toxic shame. And the way they do that is they can't communicate the difference between doing something imperfect and being imperfect. So all of us as children end up being confused, and we grow up thinking that if we made a mistake, we as a person are a mistake. And this is what creates the false self. So this is why we all become doers and not beers, all right? Because again, there's a mistake between the doing something imperfect and being imperfect. They get skewed. So our parents, when we do something, they make the being us the problem. Instead of the action the problem, we become the problem. And that's what gives birth to all of us being, I call it the Nike philosophy. Everyone's a grinder. Gotta go do. You have no worth unless you accomplish something. It is part of being human to do things and achieve things. But our compulsion and our obsession with being doers is a direct result of toxic shame. It is not okay to be. And look at our culture. Very few people can just sit and be. They need to have something going. I talk about this in my book, Your Journey to Success. Can you sit still for 30 seconds? No TV, no phone, no external stimulus at all. Just sit and be. I cannot tell you how many emails and private messages I get from that passage in the book of people going, I couldn't make it 30 seconds. Oh my God, I had no idea. I was so filled with trauma, fear, shame, and denial, which are the 4 stages of the worst day cycle. So that's what happens. We become doers, not beers. And Bradshaw, who to me is one of the best experts on shame, although there's certain people where it's pieces, Bradshaw did a great job of it. He describes it this way: toxic shame is a rupture of the authentic self that necessitates developing a false self. See, when our parents incorrectly correct us, and instead of correcting what we're doing, they send the message that the way we are being is bad. That creates the rupture. All of a sudden in that moment, wow, when I be me, I get in trouble. I get shamed. I get belittled. Instead of our parents communicating what you're doing is perfectly imperfect. Who you are isn't even perfect. It's just flat out imperfect. That's the rupture. In toxic shame, the self becomes an object of its own contempt. Because see, if my parents can't even love me, if they see the being of me as so faulty, we must have contempt for ourselves. Because we have to align with our parents. Our life depends on that connection. So we embody that contempt when they looked at us, when they pointed the finger, when they rolled their eyes, and shame many times is the absence It's neglect. The fact that they didn't even notice us. That creates the contempt. Think of that. The poor child who wasn't even noticed. That's a lot of what shame is. The complete absence of care. Complete neglect. Again, in toxic shame, the self becomes an object of its own contempt. An object that can't be trusted. A toxically shamed person is divided within themselves and must create a false self to cover up, to hide his or her sense of being flawed and defective. You cannot offer yourself to another person if you do not know who you really are. And as I get into kind of 5 characteristics here of the false self, you're going to see how that phrase, you cannot offer yourself to another person if you don't know who you really are. You're going to see the signs of the toxically shamed person, how important that is. A shame-based person will guard against exposing his or her inner self to others, but more significantly, they will guard against exposing themselves to themselves. This is at the heart of toxic shame. People think they know who they are, especially this is the successful, because they have used shame and self-loathing to motivate themselves so they don't feel this feeling of no worth and neglect and shame. And so they can't even see themselves accurately. It's a secret. They're hiding from themselves. They keep themselves so busy achieving, doing, they can't be. It's just too overwhelming to experience those feelings. So let's talk about, I picked 5 characteristics of the false self that gets created through toxic shame. And the first one is that we become doers, not beers. The doing becomes the being. In other words, I don't have value in your eyes or my eyes unless I'm doing. Now you think about life, think of your own life and the people you know. What are most conversations about? What they're doing, right? How they are doing more than anybody else. Everyone's life story is about their doing, not their being. Because what's our being? That's our heart. We can't go there, as we'll talk about in a minute. So everyone's life is about the doing. And that's what we become as toxically shamed people. The doing becomes the being. We only know how to do because to be us was and still is a mistake. The being of us is a mistake. That's what happened to us as children. So what we do determines who we are, therefore we all become doers and we can't just be. And so if you want to prove it to yourself, see if you can last 60 seconds without doing anything, no stimulus at all. I had to learn how to stop doing. And I talk about this in my book, Your Journey to Success, where I was in an apartment at the time and every night I worked on learning how to be because I was a doer. And I would sit and there was a mountain and planes would, it was a flight path. So planes would come over the mountain. It would take about 4 to 6 minutes. I can't remember exactly. I wrote in the book and it was more fresh in my memory then. But as they'd come over the mountain, it'd take 4 to 6 minutes for them to crest the mountain and then disappear behind the roof of the patio of my apartment complex. And so I'd sit there and I would just focus watching that plane, not getting diverted, like my peripheral vision, I could feel and sense and hear other things. I'd allow myself to absorb and be in the moment and all the different sights and sounds, but I'd never take my eyes off of it. And man, you want to talk about the anxiety that comes up and the pain from just sitting there doing nothing. I talked about that too, because when you're a doer, you're all about control. You can't sit still. You got to make it happen. And I tell another story in the book of, I was an Uber driver. Many people don't know that. It wasn't very long ago. I was broke and an Uber driver. And I knew I had to stop doing. And one of the things I would do is I'd drop somebody off and then I'd go, well, I got to go over here. I'll get a ride here. Like I needed money. I was going broke. But I knew me doing, trying to make it happen, trying to force it, be a Nike grinder and do was killing me. It's the problem with all of us. I knew I had to learn to be and let go and let life come to me. I talk about this in my chapter on how to learn how to do this. And I'll never forget, I dropped this person off. I pulled over this hotel parking lot and I just started raging, crying, bawling my eyes out, punching the steering wheel. All this anger and venom just poured out of me at the thought of just being. That's what's underneath all the doing. That shame that I'm not worth anything unless I do something. I have to do it or I'm nothing. That's what came out of me. I just bawled. I let it go. I am of value. Just being, even as an Uber driver sitting in a hotel parking lot, I am of value. And that's what that taught me. And it took me about 30 minutes to process all of that out. And finally, I just got quiet. And all of a sudden, I started to notice the trees. It was a spring day, the weather, the temperature was beautiful. I saw the world I was in. It was beautiful. See, with toxic shame, world isn't beautiful unless we do something. And then we do it and it loses its significance like that because we got to be on to the next doing. We can never be. Well, I was finding it. And in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to do squat. Like, I don't want another ride. This is beautiful. Look at that tree. Look at the magnificence of the way the light was bouncing off the leaves. And you know what happened right then? Ding! I got a ride. See, that's what you learn when you let life come to you, when you stop doing. It just happens. It just happens. So that's the first sign of toxic shame. We become doers, not beers. All right? Number 2, we are codependent. Everyone on this planet is codependent. Not a single one of us isn't. As I say all the time, the so-called successful are what they call the falsely empowered. Stay tuned. I'm about to do a really deep series on codependence because most people are completely unaware about the falsely empowered codependent, and so it'll be really groundbreaking for you. But much of toxic shame happens before the age of 3, before conscious awareness. That's what people don't realize. It gets downloaded into us, all right? It's out of our awareness. And it's not just what our parents did to us, but again, it's what they did not do for us. So many times, many of us nowadays are raised by a single parent. We're left alone. We're raised by teachers. We're raised by daycare. It's just an overwhelming prospect in this world to raise a child. And so, and then the fact that we're all perfectly imperfect. And that creates this codependent need. And because many times in these instances, what happened is because our parents were perfectly imperfect and couldn't process their emotions, those got dumped into us. And so that phrase we all say that you made me think, feel, or do? Well, this is a direct byproduct of toxic shame. Nobody ever makes us think, feel, or do. And we now have scientific proof of it. I know you guys think, well, not you guys, but many people think that other people make us feel something. It's not true. That's not how emotions work. We create our own emotional condition. I'm going to do some videos on that coming soon because the view that people have about how emotions are made, that, they're instinctive, it's not true. We have new neuroscience that proves most of the things that people think are true and how they run their lives, it's now been proven wrong. And so that's what I try and do. I'm always researching, and we have new neuroscience and new information about how emotions are made. The ways that we've all been raised is wrong. They are not inherent in us. They are something we create within us based on our life experiences. And that's what happened to us. In those moments as a child, when our parents were imperfect, they did actually make us feel. They were our first experiences of seeing, feeling, and doing these things. And we learned in those moments to categorize them. And that's when we learned and became codependent and went, oh, mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, priest, teacher, whatever, made me think, feel, or do this. That's where we learned codependence. Okay? Again, I'll get more in depth on that in other videos, but I know this is tough to hear, but nobody ever makes us feel anything. We generate and create our own emotions. There aren't even categorized emotions that we all have. These are all learned behaviors that we construct within ourselves. Okay, again, I'll do another video on that at some point, so be patient. The next thing that creates our codependence is, and is a sign of our toxic shame, is we don't know our morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. I talk about this all the time because we had to adapt whatever our parents' morals and values were, whatever their needs and wants were, and we couldn't. Look at what happened when we started to say no at age of 2. We got in big trouble, right? Our morals and values need, now some of this is great parenting. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying if our parents ever stood up to us, they're bad parents. But many times they don't know the difference between communicating to us your actions or your view on this aren't exactly healthy because they don't know theirs. No one taught them this either. So they're just replaying their own trauma history too. All of this stuff just keeps flowing downhill. And so because of that, we are just living our adult lives based on previous. Now, I know some of you will say, well, I do the exact opposite of my parents. Well, you don't realize that's codependence. That's enmeshment, the black sheep who went the opposite direction. They are still owned and controlled by their parents' morals and values. They're just going, I'll do the opposite. Well, do you see? That's not even yours. You're still doing the opposite of theirs. You are dependent on their values to determine yours. It was never yours, even though you went the opposite direction. Again, that's what I mean. We're all codependent. So we need to, and I'll give you a reference on how to figure these out because you need to work through this and determine them for yourself. But stay till the end as I want to give you, as I always do, resources to correct all this. All right. Also, if you notice, we all say, I don't know a lot. Well, I mean, there are things we just don't know. That's part of life. We learn things. But many times people in a situation they've been in all the time, they're like, I don't know. They can't decide for themselves. Why is that? Again, because those decisions were made for us. We weren't allowed to. Our parents took care of all that. And that's because we don't know who we are. Remember, with toxic shame, we've lost our authentic self. We don't know who it is. We don't know who we are or what we are. We had to suppress it to survive, to create connection with our parents. We had no choice. We're not bad. And our parents aren't bad either. Again, we're just starting to talk about all this stuff. For after millions of years of being on the planet, we're just finally dealing with it. So, we got a lot to learn, and that's okay. That doesn't mean any of us are bad. Now again, this is the toxically shamed person won't be able to distinguish that what I'm describing is our actions are imperfect, not because we're bad people, but because we haven't learned the correct actions. I'm constantly making that distinction between the two. I'm always talking about actions and learned behaviors, but I'm separating it. That doesn't mean you're bad. Yet, because people are so toxically shamed, they will hear me as saying that I'm bad. I'm not. That's them creating their own emotion from their own past, from their parent. They're saying, oh, there's Kenny being just like my mom and dad, telling me I'm bad, or telling oh my God, if I believe my parents are good, that makes me bad. I'm not saying that. Again, that's the whole point. You see, you're creating your own reality that I'm not even saying. Based on the trauma history you've been through, that's the false self right there. And so you're actually protecting the false self, going, no, don't challenge this, because Kenny, I developed this false self to stay close to my parents. It's how I survived. So you're telling me I don't know who I am? No, I can't hear that. So you cover over it and blame me. Like, these are all the defense mechanisms. All of that is codependence. And that's what makes us dependent on somebody else, and we become the chameleon. Think through your life. Think how many times you get in a conversation, you change how you respond, whether you respond, the way you respond, how much detail you give or don't give, the different stories you tell, how we are all chameleon-like when we describe who we are, because we are so dependent on them accepting us. we can't even accept our own authentic self and go, oh, they just see the world different. All of those are codependent characteristics. So number 3 leads into number 3. We self-abandon. When we become a chameleon and do all these things, we have lost who we are. And one of the greatest ways that we abandon ourselves is through toxic relationships. I don't know anybody that hasn't experienced toxic relationships. Well, the only reason you experience toxic relationships is because in your childhood you experienced toxic relationships. We pursue the relationship dynamics we had in our childhood. And it just fascinates me how many people will say, I was with a narcissist, but my childhood was perfect. Absolutely impossible. It's not, you cannot do that. That is not how I can't get into the science of how that, well, read my book. It's all in my book. We become what we learn. And so if you've been in toxic relationships, you were shamed. You are stuck in toxic shame. That's why you did it. Well, we all have. Because remember what Bradshaw said, we're incapable of intimacy. We can't connect. Because we couldn't connect to ourselves, and we couldn't connect to our parents, because they couldn't connect with us. So we don't know how. We don't know how. Another way we self-abandon is through addiction. Well, nearly everyone on this planet is addicted to something. Now, there are those addictions that we don't condone, heroin and, serious, even there. Geez, look at how I just said serious. They're all serious. They're all self-abandonment. But we condone some, like work. Oh, no, work's not an addiction. Work is good for me. Working out is good for me. Animals, pets, those are good for me. Food's good for me. Yeah. We have all these addictions that we condone and say, oh, those aren't that big of a deal. Alcohol is really condoned now. Like all of these, that's what we've done with weight issues. We've made it socially acceptable to be 30 to 100 pounds overweight, even more than that. It's just, no, oh my God, don't even mention. You can't, I'll probably this video will probably get banned because I just said that. Somebody's going to file a complaint that I just triggered them and shamed them and did all this stuff. Well, no, you did that to yourself. That's not me. That's based on your own history. I don't have the power to make you feel anything. If you have a negative reaction to what I say, you are creating that within yourself. Again, I'll do videos on how emotions work so you can understand that none of us, every emotion you experience, you are creating in yourself. It's how our brain and bodies work. Nobody ever makes us feel anything. All right? So, getting back to addiction, sugar, social media, rage, all of these things. This is a result of toxic shame, self-abandonment. Number 4 is we blame. There's an inability to take ownership, and so we blame others. We do that by saying, you made me think, feel, or do. You'll see that in relationships. When people describe their relationship history, they'll always talk about how the other person was to blame. We also blame ourselves. 2 phrases that I hear everybody use nonstop that are key indicators of toxic shame are should and could. I should have done this. I could have done that. That's blaming ourselves. It's just not true. If you should have done it, or if you could have done it, you would have. But you were incapable of it at the time. And so that's that child right there. That's the message of the child, the replaying of the parent within the child saying, you shouldn't have done that. You could have done better. Who you are is bad. You, child, are to blame. That's what should and could are. You are to blame. Your parents sent you that message. That's heartbreaking that we all get stuck saying those things to ourselves, but that's where it comes from. Finally, number 5, secrecy. We hide who we are. Brene Brown talks about this the best. She describes shame as a disease that you put in a petri dish, all right? Now, if you take a virus like that, like shame, or a virus in general, and you put it in a petri dish and you put it in the dark, it explodes. It consumes the whole petri dish. When you bring it out into light, it dissolves. The light heals it. But how do we all live our lives? Almost in complete secrecy. Teal Swan talks about this. She talks about shame beautifully too. That's another person. If her book where she talks of some of her stuff I don't agree with, but her description of shame is beautiful. And she talks about cover emotions. And this is one of the ways we hide who we are. I mean, I've talked about this too. Anger is just a mask for fear. Whenever someone is angry, literally, remember, anger is fear, and fear is always one of three things: the fear of rejection, inadequacy, or powerlessness. So whenever you see somebody angry, literally what you're seeing is a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12-year-old child filled with toxic shame, screaming at you at the top of their lungs, saying, please, please don't find out how inadequate and powerless I feel right now, and by God, don't you dare reject me. That's what the anger is covering. That's their fear. So it's covering inadequacy, powerlessness, and a fear of rejection, low self-esteem, tremendous pain. Other covers that she talks about is hatred hiding hurt, and anger, well, I just said anger hiding fear, rage hiding powerlessness, when we're numb. Well, she uses blank and shock and confusion. To me, numb is dissociative. It's we want to leave the world. And, you know, they show that 70% of the population doesn't feel. We're all numb from toxic shame. We can't even deal with what we're feeling. It's too overwhelming. So we've left our body, all right? Also, with that toxic shame, when we hide like that, we can't share who we are. We can't be in relationship. We can't share our perfect imperfections. Think about it. What do we want when somebody screws up? We just want them to own it, because in the background, we all know, yep, I do that. Like, look at what's happening with politicians. Like, whether you like Trump or not, when all of his stuff came out, you know, of how he treated women before the election, he still got elected because most people are like, yep, I do that too. What about Clinton 20 years earlier? His affair. Everyone's going, well, I cheat all the time too, so I don't really care about his affair. But see, we're all doing it in secret. That's why you got, oh my God, how do they put up with this? Well, because everyone's doing it in secret. We all have, like, think through your life. How many things are you doing secretly? How many addictions and little things do you do that you don't let anyone know about? We all have secrets. That's part of what I had to learn. That's why I'm so open with what a train wreck I am, and all my addictions and all my struggles. And I use them to teach this process, because I had to learn to take that petri dish out of the dark and bring it into the light and go, look, this is me. It's all of me. There's nothing wrong. And so I get, I'll be honest, I get afraid all the time that I'm going to be canceled, that the things I say, somebody's going to freak out. Well, the truth, like, I could go through each video and I could point out, oh my gosh, why did I say that? That's probably scientifically incorrect or wrong. Like, I make mistakes in every one of my videos that could cause me nothing but trouble, and I leave them in. You know why? Because we all make mistakes. But toxic shame says, no, you can't make mistakes. So all this canceling that's going on, Joe Rogan and everything, is people, because of their own internal shame, they're projecting it, saying, you're bad. It's their own self-loathing that they're taking out on somebody else. Well, I'm not going to play into that. So when I get more exposure and people start doing that to me, I'm just going to go, yeah, I'm imperfect. I screwed up. I'm not going to make excuses. I'll just go, yeah, and it's okay that I screw up. And I'm sad that you can't accept your screwing up, because your anger at me is actually your loathing of yourself. Do you see that? Because you screw up just as much as I do. This is about us. It's not about me. We share this, but you want to make it about me. but you're making it about me shows me it's about you. Like, I love you. Please, can we get to the real topic? How you feel so shameful inside of you that you need to make me the problem. Let's talk about that. Now let's share equally and openly. Let's take that virus out of the closet and share it with each other. How we're both perfectly imperfect and we're both toxically shame-based. Like, you can share it with me. Because obviously, you're seeing from all my stuff, I'm pretty messed up. Well, so are you. Why don't we just hug it out and accept each other for that instead of trying to cancel each other? So, let me give you some solutions. Obviously, there's a lot, this is not a quick, easy solution. I have programs. I work with clients for, a long period of time to help them heal this. But some quick things that you can do is, first, go to my YouTube channel, look at my Worst Day Cycle playlist, and I did a 5-part series on the Worst Day Cycle. Video number 4 speaks specifically to shame if you want to learn more in depth about it. If you want to, but to really heal the shame, you need to work through the 4 stages of the Worst Day Cycle. And so I encourage you to watch all 5 of those videos that are in that playlist, all right? Also, watch my next video coming up after this in, 2 days. It'll be, and it's titled Toxic Shame Healing. I will get more in depth on how to heal this. Now, remember earlier I said the codependence problem. We don't know our morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. Go to my codependence playlist on YouTube and watch 3 videos. They all start with the title Codependence Recovery. And then it says understanding morals and values, deciding your needs and wants, I don't know, something like that. But you'll see morals and values, needs and wants, negotiables and non-negotiables. Watch all 3 of those and do that process. Everyone tries to skip this. I'm serious. You can't live your life unless you do this because you don't know who you are. I know you think you do. Everyone says I do. Oh, I don't want to do it. Well, that's you holding on to your toxic shame. Now, if you want to hold on to your toxic shame, knock yourself out. Go ahead. But until you work that process, you're stuck. And you're stuck in your parents' pain. And so I'll let you decide if that works for you or not. I'd also encourage you to sign up for my free masterclass. This gives you the basics to turn emotional misery into emotional mastery. And you get that at my website, www.thegreatnessyou.com. There are several masterclasses. The one that you're looking for says Your Journey to Emotional Mastery, and you'll see it says free. Now, I made a mistake in previous videos. I talked that, you don't have to give anything. Well, you do have to put in your address and a password so that only you can access your course, but I don't collect them, all right? And finally, if you really want to navigate the toxic shame, pick up a copy of my book, Your Journey to Success. It walks you through the Worst Day Cycle, the 4 stages of it, how it shows up in your life, how you learned it, developed it, how we all are stuck in these elements of toxic shame, and how, at least to me, you may disagree, but I'd love to see what would happen if we all brought the virus out of the closet, the secrecy, and started sharing it openly. So if you agree with that, please share this video with others you think that might help. Leave me your comments, and as always, enjoy the journey.